It's time to take your business to the next level, the boss level. These are the premier business owner strategies and successes being utilized by the industry's top talent today. Rock your business like a boss, a VO boss. Now let's welcome your host, Ganguzza.
Hey everyone, welcome to the VO Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Ganguzza, along with the audio VO tech guru extraordinaire, Tim Tippets. Hey Tim.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. So, Tim, I have another audio question for you.
What?
I do. So, Tim, I have clients that require me to clean up my audio all the time. And by clean up, I mean I have some e-learning clients that need like my breaths removed. They need my clicks gone. They need it like split files ready to go because, to be honest with you, they're not the audio engineers. All they really do is place the audio into the module. And so there's a lot of stuff that I have to do. And I have an effects stack from yours truly that really helps me do my job much more efficiently. And also, I do have a lot of students that ask me, well, how do I take the breaths out? Do I not take the breaths out? And I know that this is just a question that is constantly on the forum. So I think we should talk about to affect or not to affect.
Yes. Well put. So with your particular effects rack, we, and by the way, this is it depends is the answer, right? Which is a horrible thing to say. I hate giving answers like that. But the reality is that most people are referring to what it is that you're talking about as broadcast quality. And exactly what does that mean? And it could mean any number of things to any number of people, but in your particular case, like your e-learning clients, for instance,
right?
Most of your e-learning is not going to have music in the background.
Correct.
Right. And so it's going to be just you and your voice. So if someone were to ask me, well, should you affect that audio? Well, it depends. So let's talk about what it might depend on. Let's say that your mic has self noise to it, like it has a light hiss or something like that, or you have some background noise. We know that for those out there who may or may not know what a high pass filter is, it's usually referred to by most of us as rolling off the low end, 80 hertz and below, because this is an area in the spectrum, in the EQ spectrum, where there's a lot of low end, what they might refer to as rumble or noise. And it's just not stuff that's in our voice anyway. So if we filter that out and we're getting our noise floor lower than it otherwise would be, then why wouldn't you do that, right? So the answer there, if you know what you're doing, would be yes, you should affect your audio. Right. Now that's not really affecting your audio in the same manner which a lot of people might refer to affecting audio, which is, a lot of compression, messing with the EQ, limiting, and all those other types of things. But in your case, you use what? A declicker and denoiser?
Yep.
And you use what we have in there, a downward expander to push the noise floor down.
Yep.
And when you run those, there is no noticeable difference between the raw and the affected, aside from us removing the things that we don't want in the first place. Isn't that right?
Exactly.
Okay. So in your case, if it's not affecting the audio, clearly the answer is yes, you should affect your audio. Okay. Now, if someone has a really, really clean signal, a really, let's say, expensive or high quality microphone, high quality preamp, the acoustics are great and all of that, and there are no other issues, like they have no mouth noise or clicks or hiss or anything like that, then the answer could easily be no, you shouldn't affect your audio. Okay.
But that's rarely the case. I think most everybody I speak to has some form of mouth noise that they want to get rid of.
Right, exactly. So the depends on, does the person know what they're doing, or have they had someone come in and help them to set things up who does know what they're doing? And so for all intents and purposes, the audio is better than it was when it was raw.
Absolutely.
And it's something that the audio engineer would want anyway.
By the way, for those bosses out there, if you have not thought about this, I'm not an audio engineer, so I'm only too happy to have someone like Tim help me out with that particular effects stack that I might need for my clients.
Right. And that's what I was saying is, like, if you have someone who knows what they're doing, who is riding shotgun with you for all intents and purposes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Who can get you there. When I'm looking at an audio signal that has not been affected compared to one that has been affected, and I can tell that the EQ curve, for instance, the print of the EQ over time has not changed, then clearly I'm going to be happy with it, because if the person on the other end knows what they're doing and they're removing, like we voice in boxes for all intents and purposes, right? We're in booths. We're not in very large studio rooms. So those booths respond in a boxy manner. So if you have properly identified where that boxiness is and you've removed it from the signal, would I be smart or stupid to say that I don't want you touching the audio? If you know what you're doing, if you've properly identified where the boxiness is, I'm going to want you to remove it. Okay.
And I'll be honest, for me, because that's not what I do, right, on a daily basis, I don't, I might be able to say, oh, it sounds boxy, but I wouldn't know where to even begin to start to get rid of it. So that's where you come in.
Right. And just by removing the boxiness, you're pushing the voice forward in the mix, which is something that we do want, right? We don't want the voice being kind of like in the background and just weak. We want it forward in the mix so that we can, it sounds like it's in your head, which is where we want the voice, right? And that's true across all genres, right? It doesn't matter if it's e-learning or whatever it is. What we definitely don't want, though, is we don't want anything in there that distracts us. So if you are able to affect your voice with an effect stack or whatever plugin you might be using that will get rid of that distraction without destroying the audio or hurting the audio in some way, then the answer is yes, you should use an effects rack. From the engineer's point of view, and you know that voiceover is all about repeat customers, right? It's not about just getting new jobs all the time. You develop relationships, you're executing at a very high level for these people, and they're happy with you. So
that's
so why
survival.
wouldn't they? Right, exactly. So
that's
why
career survival that right there.
Right, and we're all about the lifetime value of our clients, right?
Absolutely.
So for me personally, when I have had an engineer who has not worked with me or a producer who has not worked with me before, but heard my demo and wants to work with me, and I've bid the job, and they said, okay, let's move forward. And they say something like, please make sure that you send in your audio raw. For me, knock on wood, I have never sent my audio in raw, not even once. Okay. And also, not even once have I ever heard someone come back and say, we told you not to do anything to your audio. Okay. The comments that I usually get are along the lines of, hey, it sounds great. Or sometimes I'll get, my God, man, what are you running over there? Right. Which I don't get into that conversation because that'll take 30 minutes. Right. But because they geek out on that kind of stuff. They love it. So if we're getting something along the lines of audio that is not overly compressed or not overly EQ'd or whatever the case may be, because a lot of people will go to YouTube in order to find out how to do this stuff.
Right. And
we have a lot of musicians who are saying, hey, you should do this, that, and the other thing. Well, taking a musical approach to voiceover is not at all the same thing, because one of the things that those engineers are counting on later on in the mix, when they have other instruments in play, where they're blending the vocal with the other music, is heavy compression to make sure that the vocal's nice and loud, EQing it, doing all sorts of things to it, where we can't hear the bad parts, right? We can't hear what might be happening in the background or whatever. We don't have that opportunity in voiceover. It's just us and the microphone. That's it. Okay. Yeah. So anything that happens is going to distract. And so our job is to give them nothing to notice.
So
okay?
Can I go back and just ask you that question? Because you said something that made me think. When people have asked me for raw audio, first of all, I'm fortunate that I have a great studio, right? And so all I pretty much will do is clean up where I might have, flubbed up in my voice, right? And just take out a mistake. But I actually have never run any of the effect stacks. But what you're saying is that you are able to run the effect stacks for you because you're not doing anything that's affecting your voice. And nobody has come back and said, hey, we told you not to do that. That just was like a light bulb for me. I was like, can I apply my effect stack and send that audio as raw audio when people are requesting it, and people will when they won't know the difference?
Well, you are essentially sending them raw audio as far as they know, because
right.
you're removing things or enhancing things to the degree that you're making it sound as though you might have a more expensive preamp or a more expensive microphone, et cetera, right?
Very interesting.
Yeah, I have a sample on VOTechGuru.com, and then you go to services. There's a pre and post of a person there who was off mic. They weren't quite in the right position. They definitely were not EQ'd. There was no compression involved or anything like that. And this person wasn't getting work. And so they were on a $110 MXL microphone, okay? And the pre and post is pretty astounding. What this person wanted was kind of more of a what they call a sweetened sound, right? So it's more for like mom and pop shops, who really don't know much about this stuff and just need to be able to put it on there and have it be ready. And that's the kind of sound that I produced for this individual. But the thing is when you're off mic and you have acoustic issues and you also have some other things that could be improved, like let's say sibilance, for instance,
right?
If that sibilance is responsibly pulled out, then all you're really getting on the other end from the audio engineer's perspective
is your voice,
is the voice, right? Because they don't have the advantage of hearing the pre and the post.
Right.
So if it's done correctly,
that makes sense.
There's no way that they're going to know.
And responsibly, I think, is a key word there, Tim, because here's the deal. I only mention that because I feel so comfortable with the sound of my booth raw anyways, but I also feel super comfortable with my effects stack, which was created by you. But if I have it and I have the confidence in knowing that you're not doing anything to my voice. You're simply taking out those distracting, noises and clicks. And so, this has brought like a whole new epiphany to me where I'm like, that makes sense. And I would be sending, yes, it's raw audio. It's just the audio without my mouth clicking, or maybe my headphone, because we were talking about this before, maybe my headphones clicking.
Right.
So
right. Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And as long as it's done responsibly, I want to say that, make sure we get that out there.
I'm glad that you're pushing so hard on that, because responsibly really is the key to it.
Yes, I agree.
I've had a lot of people who have said, I don't understand why I'm not getting work. My audio sounds fine to me. And then I get the sample and it's clearly being overprocessed, right? It's being too heavily hit. But that's okay. You don't know what you don't know.
Well,
right?
Exactly. I don't have the ears. And that's why I'm a firm believer in outsourcing that to people who do. This is what you do. Like, your ears are your living. My voice is my living. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that should be the primary concern, is you should be focusing on performance and not on, do I sound good or not? And so that's why it's so important to get that out of the way. But again, the people that we're sending the audio to, they don't have that contrast. They don't have the before and the after. So it's just like any raw resource that you might be bringing to them. The same can be said for, food supply or whatever. Who knows what that looked like when it was at the farm before it got washed, before it got sorted. Would a restaurant want them to clean it and sort it?
Good analogy. Yeah.
And bring it to the restaurant? Or do they literally just want them to pick it up out of the dirt and send it to their restaurant? I doubt it.
Well, yeah, and also,
I wouldn't want that.
And again, I keep pressing this responsibly, and if done responsibly, right, it's less work for the engineers on the other side. So if they're thinking about hiring again, right, they're going to be like, wow, we barely had to touch that audio. It was great, And so I really feel like they just had to take out maybe the mistakes that the vocal part, like maybe I said the wrong word, if they're like raw file, and I flubbed up here. Boom, here's my retake. And that's all they have to do. That would make their job so much easier. And I think that they would want to, they would probably be thinking, well, let's hire this person again.
Well, it goes further than that, because I can tell you absolutely, because I'm in that position myself when I do need to, because I do cast from time to time. A lot of pro talent do, right? But as an audio person, I cast, I think, a little bit more than most. And I can tell you for sure that these people, these audio engineers, have 10 to 12 things going on at the same time. Right. So the easier you make their life, the more they're going to appreciate you. So the conversation, it sounds something like this. The producer comes to the audio engineer, and you as a pro, we don't have any concerns about the delivery part of it, right? Right. But what we are concerned about is, how does it sound and how much does the audio engineer have to work with your audio? So the producer comes back and says, hey, we're thinking about hiring Ann again. And then the audio engineer says, Ann Ganguzza? And the producer says, yeah, we're thinking about it. What do you think? That audio engineer, because of their experience with you and how easy you've always made their life, they are going to, in a heartbeat, they are going to say, yes, please.
Yeah.
Definitely hire her again. Okay.
And that's so interesting that we made that parallel, because I was always, as a voice talent, I was always told, and I always teach this too, is that the closer you can get to the sound that they can just, pick it up and drop it in, the more likely you're going to get hired for that. So if you can produce that performance, same thing now. If you can produce the sound that's like a drag and drop, oh my gosh, you've just made their lives a billion times easier. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
and that's what broadcast ready means. Okay. Is when you say it's broadcast ready, that's really up to the engineer what the end result is going to be, right? So from their perspective, broadcast ready may mean it's got a lot of compression on it because it's this promo and it needs to, ride strongly along with the music bed or whatever it is that they're going to be doing with it. But from our perspective, broadcast ready means that it's nice, clean audio.
Yes, that makes sense.
Does it have a little bit of responsible compression on it? Probably. Why? Because that mimics better mic technique. It mimics better control because you're controlling the peaks, right? So you end up with a more even voiceover overall. And so the audio engineer is not going in there and increasing or lowering any particular part of the voiceover. So that's what broadcast ready means from our perspective, is we're giving them, nothing to notice. And here's the problem. So many people go online and find out how to affect their audio, in quotes, right? And they send it in, and the waveform ends up looking like railroad tracks, right? Like it's just been limited and just compressed beyond belief. And they send that in. Well, that is why a lot of people are saying, look, send in your audio raw, because here's the problem. From the engineer's perspective, you cannot unscramble eggs.
Yeah.
Okay. You can always do something with raw audio that's been cleaned up and again affected responsibly, but you can't go the other way. You can't unscramble those eggs. So that's what it is that they are trying to get at when they're talking about sending in your audio raw, is because so many of the talent out there believe that they're doing the right thing when in fact they're not. They're overdoing it. And they would rather go through the trouble of having to fix things up, even if it's got noise and clicks and all, sorts of stuff in it. They would rather go through that trouble than have you send in something that they absolutely cannot use.
And here's the thing too. More often than not, if the person, and I don't know, I'm thinking that the person that might go ahead and do and actually apply those effects that would limit and compress and all that, something tells me that because they're not necessarily experienced in knowing what they need to do to get that audio, responsibly over to their client or their engineer, they probably are not aware that they're doing, more harm than good by applying these effects.
Right. Well, how would you know though?
You don't know what you don't know. And
I don't know if we've had this conversation on one of the podcasts, but I'll just, get it out there real quick. We've talked about chocolate, right? Where I ask you if you know what chocolate tastes like, and you say, sure, I've had a Hershey's bar, but then, I take you to Paris and we go to some, fancy cafe or whatever, right? Again, once you have that chocolate, you go, oh, that's what chocolate tastes like. Well, you can't have a Hershey's bar again, right? But without having the advantage of knowing and having that contrast, for instance, being in a booth that doesn't have very good acoustics, and then suddenly, like being in the booth that you're in now, Ann, it's like clearly when you walked in there and you spoke, I remember you saying, whoa, right?
Absolutely.
Even when Jerry walked into the room, the listening area, the studio part of it, it was so much more dead than it was before.
Right. Absolutely.
It kind of flipped him out, right?
Yep.
So without having that contrast, how would you know? And by the way, for anyone listening, that's okay. Don't feel bad about it. Again, you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely. And developing an ear in anything, even in performance. I'm always talking to my students about developing an ear for conversational performance. And that is something that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, that takes some time to develop the ear. And again, in terms of engineering my audio, I'm going to entrust that to people that's what they do, in and out, day in and day out. And not that I don't have an ear for decent audio, because I need to have that. I need to have someone provide me with that benchmark. And then I can start to develop the ear for it. And again, I'm not that person that really, I don't want to spend like hours editing. I don't really know many people that do. So anything that I can get that can help me to get to the quality audio sooner, that is my friend.
No, it absolutely is. And efficiency is so important.
Yep.
As you've heard me say this before, when I'm in the booth, I'm making coins fall from my mouth. Right?
Absolutely.
And when I'm not in that booth, those coins aren't falling because I'm sitting here editing, trying to fix something that I could have gotten ahead of, by knowing what it is that I was doing. Right?
I'm always saying get it right in the booth first, because you won't be spending all that time in post. It's just...
There you go. I love that.
Better in the booth. Better in the booth.
Perfect. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So, and that's performance and your audio quality. So
yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff.
Hand in hand.
Wow. Well, that was super informative. Thank you, Tim, as always, for being a wealth of information. And I'm super excited to talk for our next podcast.
Yes, me too. Me too.
All right. Well, I'm going to give a big shout out to our sponsor, IPDTL. You too can connect and communicate like a boss, and find out more at ipdtl.com. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Join us next week for another edition of VO Boss with your host, Ann Ganguzza. And take your business to the next level. Sign up for our mailing list at voboss.com and receive exclusive content, industry revolutionizing tips and strategies, and new ways to rock your business like a boss. Redistribution with permission, coast-to-coast connectivity via IPDTL.